You need neither hard work nor talent to take advantage of Gamersupps and their free shipping sale. You just need to be able to check your calendar and answer the following question. Is it still the 23rd of May? If it is, the day this video is posted, then as long as it's not after 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time in the US or 8 p.m. Central European Daylight Savings Time in Europe, or summertime or whatever, then you can still take advantage of this sale. If you go to gamersupps.gg and use the code Thorin, Thorin, you will not only get the usual 10% off your whole order off the website, everything, not just Gamersupps, caffeine-free Gamersupps, Gamer Teas, AFK Blend, Waifu Cups, etc., but you will also get free shipping. So it's actually one of the most requested sales. It's still running now, or it potentially is. Check your calendar and your time. Take advantage of it. Now then, speaking of how much you pay for something, there was what I would call not even a drama. There was a very minor thing where, spoiler, crazy idea, a young player that didn't have a lot of media experience, in this case it's youngster from Heroic, former Sangal player, he basically did an interview with Dust2 US, and in the interview he gave what I thought was quite an interesting quote. And so I commented on the quote. I actually think from the timing of this, either Sponge, the famous analyst and commentator, saw the same thing and thought the same thing as me, parallel thinking, we're both all long in the tooth in esports, been around a long time, or he maybe even saw my tweet and agreed with the premise. So let's look at this, because the reason why I made this video, I'll just say at the outset, this is not a big deal. It's the bigger deal to me is what I think is crazy gaslighting, and then people being like elitist when they actually, I think, are just provably wrong. And I will show you logically how I could like actually basically prove they don't know what they're talking about, and they're the ones who actually are not literate and can't read a statement that someone made. But let's put that to one side. I just want to say at the outset, I don't have a big deal with the youngster saying this, by the way. He is a youngster who's inexperienced. It's also not that stupid a comment. It's mildly idiotic, but it's not some like massive thing that should hang around his neck like an albatross or be a scarlet letter that we never stop referencing. If anything, it's already turned into a meme that he himself has sort of acknowledged, and has actually been quite fun between him, Falcons, some of the other players out there. It's actually just turned into something funny. But this is an example of where I'm actually certain I know what I'm talking about, and that almost everyone who disagreed is absolutely just being a contrarian and actually looks quite stupid once you reason it through. So first things first, this is where this all comes from. You had youngster from Heroic was going to face Falcons at IEM Dallas for a playoff spot, and look what quote they picked just to US. By the way, excellent quote to pick. This makes me want to read this interview, whereas I know nothing about this guy, except they used to be on Sangal and he's on Heroic. So I would probably never go and read an interview from this guy. By the way, I will just say as an aside, if you do video and audio interviews, it is awesome when there's a transcription. I can tell you, Lurpus told me this back in the day, but at the time, I wasn't someone who was as busy as I am now. If you're really busy, it takes forever to watch a little video interview. It takes seconds to skim through a text interview. So they did this one where it said, banger quote, "We're here to prove hard work beats money." Oh, that's some pretty good WWE trash talk, right? Hey, we're going to prove that hard work beats money, though. Because remember, you can't say we've got better players. You can't say, like, we did a better job putting our team together. They've obviously spent bazillions. They've got HLTV top 20 players. They're only going to add more players. How are you even going to frame this as, like, what's your motivation? It can't only be to upset, right? Well, in this case, we're going to prove that hard work beats money. Now, we'll get to the fact that that quote isn't even the actual quote. He sort of, like, misheard it or didn't understand the whole quote. But we'll get to that in a second. Then we'll go and we'll just at the outset to establish the facts, same quote here, we'll just go and read 20-year-old guy. He's not scared to face Monacy and Nikos. Let's scroll all the way down. They even used it, by the way, on the thumbnail. So let's scroll all the way down. And it says this following question. We're going to refer back to this a number of times. Now that you've beaten Aurora, you're playing Falcons for a spot in the playoffs in a sort of young versus old, expensive versus rookies matchup. So, okay, first thing to point out is it was Dust2 US who were the ones who established this aspect that we're actually also addressing the cost of their team. That's what we're also going to be addressing, is that there's an expensive team, yours is rookies. And they put, how are you feeling about the match going up against such an expensive squad? Again, this is really weird framing, by the way. Not again against a squad with like some of the best players in the world and some of the most firepower. You know, an analytical aspect about the game says he's a player. Instead, you're talking to a player who isn't a general manager, doesn't understand the economics of even Counter-Strike, by the way, I'll tell you, because the majority of players don't. And you're asking him almost like, yeah, but how about your squad? How's it going to be to play against a team that's really expensive? Now, what's weird about that, by the way, is you don't even get that in sports often. Do you know how weird it would actually be for someone to say to like a Newcastle, if you don't know, Newcastle actually has been above Man City in the table a bunch. You know how weird it would be to say to a Newcastle player in the English Premier League, what's it like to go against such an expensive squad in Man City? Well, what a weird thing to say. Like, that you'd say something like, what would you think about going against a squad with so many great players or such a great team or a team that's so star-studded? But no, those two US have chosen to inject the whole like financial aspect, which is surely about the org, not this CS team and the players. They're the ones who've injected this into it, and that's why Youngster addresses this. Also, I'm not mad at him, by the way. So what he does is he comes up with a good soundbite on the fly. He says, our team is hungry as always. We're here to prove that hard work beats money, so we're very motivated. We're not going to give too much respect to them because we'd lose confidence. So we're treating every opponent equally. Now, we'll refer back to that, but first of all, let's just do a little bit of housekeeping. The big problem Youngster has immediately is he's already fucked up because you know this quote, prove hard work beats money. That sounds like a really famous cliche quote, right, from sports. It isn't. Everyone always gets this wrong, and in doing so, they've actually ruined the lesson of the quote. So if you just take the quote as hard work beats talent, which is what you've probably heard, right? That's what you've probably heard is the quote. Now, the problem with that obviously goes, that would be an incredibly extreme set of circumstances. Like how often in sports or competition would you ever really get someone who wasn't talented, because you're implying it's this dichotomy, they're not particularly talented, but they work really hard, and then they'll beat someone who's only talented and isn't working hard. Because that's basically what that implies, is that like if you work hard enough, you beat the talented person. And it's almost making a weird world in which you have hardworking people and talented people, which is bizarre to me because almost every single great competitor I know is both talented and has some degree of work ethic. Now, some have more. The Monacies, the Simples, the Get Rights have the most hard work and work ethic. Maybe some have way less. You hear of people like Fur, or maybe you want to throw like Henny in there. Or, I mean, there's a whole bunch of players who are just being famously, they're a bit lazy when it comes to practice. What's his name? Shagwar back in the day, Kenny S. These are players who don't put in as much crazy time in the practice, right? So you could draw a really extreme comparison between people beating Kenny S who were lesser offers. Yeah, I've seen it happen. Maybe they were harder working. Vice versa. Have people who... what would the vice versa be? It'd be the same concept, right? Obviously, it goes the other way too. You sometimes get people like Kenny S, fuck around, don't even scrim at all, just play the officials, and then they actually thrash a guy who's trying his hardest every day. I don't know, pick like Keith when he was in Big, or Smooya when he was on one of these teams. A guy like that can fuck around and still beat these guys. So it's also not a rule. It's kind of just a guideline. It's a quote. It's a pithy quote to make you think it's food for thought. So first of all, it's not even the quote. If you don't know, the quote is by a guy called Tim Notkey, when I looked this up, who's apparently just like a high school coach. And the real quote is excellent. The real quote is, hard work beats talent. It doesn't stop there. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. So the modifier is carrying the whole thing. Because what it's saying is, well, of course, you're very rarely going to get people who are just hardworking without much talent, and then people who have talent and don't work hard at all. So being as that's going to be quite rare, more often, you're going to get people who have talent, but they haven't worked hard enough. So essentially, they haven't maximized their talent. So their talent means, let's just say this is the ceiling of how good they could be. The talent not being working hard enough makes it probably harder to consistently hit the ceiling. Whereas in this case, if you work really, really, really hard, you can consistently hit your ceiling. So even if you're less talented, their talent level can go to here. Yours can only go to here, but you can consistently hit that. They go all the way up and down. So maybe this time they're there and you're there. So they go to there and you hit there and you're slightly above and you win the game. That makes sense, and it's a great learning tool to give and teaching tool for players, isn't it? Because what you're telling players is, listen mate, people like Kobe Bryant and Stephen Curry, really talented, but they also work the hardest. That's why they're the greatest of all time. Because obviously what you're also trying to tell in this quote, by the way, is everyone thinks this quote is about the guy without the talent. No, surely the quote is about the talented guy. That's why the second part's there. It's almost a warning for the talented guy that if you do work hard, take the opposite side. If you work hard enough, you won't lose to people with less talent, but who also just work hard. You won't just lose to the grinder because you're a grinder too, and you have more talent than him, so you've got more reasons to win the game. So first of all, it's just not a particularly good application of this quote, is it? Because actually, the first thing, contextually, we would have to consider immediately when youngster, a player, is asked about playing Falcons, he's, I assume, talking about players because he's a player. He knows fuck all about his org and their finances. So when he says, we're here to prove hard work beats money, that implies to me Falcons is money. That's a team with money. And he's actually implying they don't work hard. And that his hard work, or working even harder, is why he will beat them, because they've just spent money and him and his teammates have worked really, really hard, which, by the way, is literally what I did as the quote. I just said, what kind of dog shit framing is that? Do Monacy and Nico not work hard? Okay, kid. By the way, he even did a little wink thing. Fair enough. At least he gets it's all fucking banter. It's just Twitter, in it. As usual, the 79 IQ Gen Alpha Zoomer moron / the sort of people who look like they'd get arrested for Discord messaging someone who was a Gen Alpha Zoomer moron, aka the heroic admin, who's fucked up 1 million times on Twitter. Well, let's just pretend that didn't happen. They're just really cool. They just did the usual, okay, no, flip. Yeah, brilliant, great, brilliant one. Yeah, you're the one that's offended and coming in and doing a shit comment, but okay. So I said this, obviously, and this is then essentially what on broadcast, Sponge, when he was commentating, sort of said the same thing. He sort of said, like, this guy said this comment about, you know, we're here to prove hard work beats money, but are you, like, implying that, like, Monacy and Nico don't work hard? Because obviously Monacy is notoriously one of the hardest grinders in the scene. He's very much also the next Simple in that sense. He has an unbelievable, maybe the most talent, and then he also is the hardest worker. That's why Simple was unbeatable, in my opinion, back in the day. That's why Monacy at times looks unbeatable and untouchable in the game. So I put this out there. Now, if you know anything about esports, there are a lot of NPCs in esports whose entire brain has the following program in it. If Thorin said it, it is wrong, so I think whatever the opposite of what Thorin said is. Doesn't matter what the topic or the sentiment is or what the facts are, I think the opposite. Haha, aren't I smart? Because Thorin's always wrong, so that means I am always right. It's a bit like you might have heard a famous lie where people will pick one betting slip where I lost and they go, I've made loads of money betting the opposite to Thorin every time. You would actually be bankrupt if you'd done that. If you'd have done that at real stakes, you would literally be bankrupt. I could prove it. But okay, let's just put that blatant shit lie to one side that only a cretin would say. And let's actually get into this. Because believe it or not, I think surely everyone reads that quote and takes it how I do. It's like that's almost a shot at the other team. Like, hey, we're working really hard. You're just talented, or you've just got money. Because it's some version of money. In this case, instead of talent, it's money, right? By the way, I've even been more generous. I initially thought of it as the hard work versus talent thing. You're saying in this case, actually, hard work just beats expensive players. First of all, that doesn't even make sense, does it? Because as a general rule, the correlation between how expensive a player is in Counter-Strike and how good they are, pretty strongly correlated. You get the odd outlier, your Kindar on Team Liquid, maybe a player on Astralis or something like that. You get the odd player who's paid mega bucks and wasn't very good, some of the old Falcons players. But generally, the players that are higher on the pay scale, that would even match up with HLTV top 20s, top placings, top teams, top stats. There's a pretty strong correlation there. So actually, the idea that like money and talent are interchangeable, they are to some degree in this sense. But okay, let's see how people managed to twist themselves into a pretzel to find out that I was wrong and that it was obvious I was wrong. And in fact, no one else in the world thinks what I think and that I'm an idiot for thinking that. And then let's get into some gaslighting and let's just make up a bunch of stuff that was never in the quote, in the interview, or ever even implied, or that you could even infer, in my opinion. Let's get into that, shall we? So as opposed to calling out someone on Twitter, I'll actually just go and show you initially what one of the Reddit comments said. It was quite an upvoted comment. So Monacy himself, after the game, when he won, did a little bit of bants, didn't he? He replied after the win, just a little bit more hard work, I think. Smiley, laughing face. By the way, great banter, great back and forth. Youngster himself came and replied to some stuff. So let's go and look here. So this guy says, well, I think he goes, hard work could sure beat money, but not Monacy. Lol. Funny comment, okay. And then this guy goes, motherfuckers saying like they're the ones with money, don't put in work. Motherfuckers saying like the ones with money don't put in work. Well, I thought, lol. Now this guy here, get ready for some gaslighting. This is crazy. Like I'm not even joking. I don't think you're illiterate. I think you're actually mentally ill. So this guy goes 288 points. That's how voted this was. You and IPO Skills, so some guy down here, are being disingenuous, or you don't understand. Not I disagree and I read it differently. No, you have to be actually actively trying to mislead people, or you just don't understand what's being said. He's not talking about the players. He's talking about the orgs. Pause. We'll just go back and forwards like this, okay? Back to the interview. Our team is hungry as always. Oh, so the org. You talk about the org's really hungry. Is that what we're talking about? The org, right? Right. How are you, youngster, the player, feeling about a match you are going to play against an expensive squad? Not how is Heroic, the org, going to battle and overcome the Falcons org that has all the money. No, it's an expensive squad. Our team is hungry as always. So, by the way, it would be very relevant if you were talking about the players and the 5-man CS lineup, if you mentioned how hungry they are, if you were going to now talk about your ability in the server to perform, because how hungry you are, coupled with your hard work, would really play a massive role in how likely you are to perform in the match and to win. It wouldn't make any sense to say you're really hungry if you're talking about your org or your GM, would you? That means nothing. What would hunger have to do? Because again, by the way, are you implying that because they get loads of money, that they're not hungry on Falcons? Weird flex. Next part. We're here to prove that hard work beats money. Right? How would you be able to prove that if it's not about the game, it's about the two orgs? How would winning in the game prove that? How would that prove that exactly? So we're very motivated. Again, motivated. Why would the org be motivated? Why would an org be hungry or motivated? What are we talking about here? What, is he talking to his CEO? And then he goes on about, we're not going to give them respect. So it's about mentality, right? So let's go back to this. He's talking about the orgs. Get ready for the gaslighting. It takes hard work to build up a lineup, especially if you're investing in unproven players. Remember, this is an incredibly upvoted post, guys. So he's just said that Heroic has put in hard work building up their lineup. He's implying that, especially if you're investing in unproven players. And while Falcons seem to have finally spent enough money on the right players, it's been how many years of them blowing money on players and teams that haven't worked out and weren't put together sensibly? Pause. Now, in a pre-match interview with a Heroic player, asking him how he thinks about the matchup, a specific match in the server against an opponent that's expensive. No, his answer was all about the history of the Falcons org. And the idea that the Falcons org we're not even talking about this year's lineup. With past year's lineups, they spent a lot of money and they were blowing money on players and teams that haven't worked out and weren't put together sensibly. That's what Youngstar was addressing when he said, we're going to prove that hard work beats money. He was addressing the history of, not this 5-man lineup, which is bizarre because, explain this to me, guys. If it's not this 5-man lineup, how would beating this 5-man lineup that you yourself acknowledge have the right players prove that hard work beats money? Surely you'd have to go in a time machine and beat the old lineup, like the one with some Pius last year. Oh, some Pius, your player. We'll get to that. You'd have to do that to prove that hard work beats money in the context of the org, wouldn't you? You fucking idiot. So let's keep going. This goes deeper. Don't you even fucking worry. Your asshole is that wide open. I'm about to goatsy this motherfucker. So let's keep going. So then it goes to here. It says, if you want to see the best example of hard... By the way, where are we right now? Where on earth the fuck are we in the context of trying to explain how this player, youngster from Heroic, was talking about an upcoming match? We're off in fucking Narnia about the past of Falcons and examples in history of hard work and theories about what the fuck are we going... Oh no, but remember, it's all of us that are being disingenuous, or we just don't understand. This is all what youngster was saying, by the way. You know that Swedish player? He was saying all of this in his comment where he just said, our team is hungry as always. We're here to prove that hard work beats money. So we're very motivated. We're not giving them too much respect because we lose confidence. So we're treating each opponent equally. No. What he was actually saying was all of this about the history of Falcons, past lineups, references to like spending enough to get the right players. And now we're going to go into a whole diatribe about the theory and past great examples of this dichotomy. If you want to see the best example of hard work and the antithesis to a team like Falcons, it's probably Mongols. So not Heroic then. By the way, it would be such a great point for your fucking argument if it was Heroic, but I notice you never reference Heroic here. It's just about Falcons, even though the question was about Youngster and his team specifically playing Falcons. It was specifically Heroic. But no, you're going to explain what he's saying by never referencing to fucking Heroic. So, okay, The org invested in 5 Mongolian players. Pause. Notice what I do that I'm a master at is I charitably read what this person says. I try to understand and follow his logic and accept his points just to build them up and see where he's going. And then at the end, I show you how that's absolutely wrong. I don't try to gaslight this person, strawman this person, none of it. The org invested in 5 Mongolian players. They've stuck it out and they've climbed the ladder up to tier 1 CS. Right, one, that's literally not even true. If you know the Mongols, they had a team called IHC, which had some of these players, a couple of them, 1 or 2, and it was a different squad, and they actually already had upsets over the Furias of the world and stuff at past, like Katowices and Cologne and stuff. Then Mongols got them, added in a few young players, not the same ones that were in IHC, but some of them were. And then they didn't like stick it out as a 5-man unknown group of players and then make it top. No. They added some good gambles. And you're right, they very quickly went up the ladder. That's nothing like heroic. And when I show you how much that's nothing like heroic, you're going to understand that contextually, this is disingenuous. And this person is either lying, an idiot, or literally doesn't know what they're talking about when it comes to heroic. They're just making a completely different point that has nothing to do with this heroic roster. Because let me just ask you a quick question, and you'll be able to answer it before I even show you. Has heroic indeed signed 5 unknown players, stuck it out, worked with them, climbed the ladder of tier 1 CS. Meanwhile, Falcons just walked in with money. So there we go. While Falcons, for like the past 3 years, again, it was a question for a player today about his team, when the question was asked, today, playing against Falcons today in a match and how he would do against them. And he referenced in the context of playing them, that exact 5-man lineup, that he would prove that hard work beats money. But no, now this is about the last 3 years of Falcons and them swapping players in and out, like their computer parts. Just go look at the history of Falcons. My lord, I wish I could stop. At this point, I really wish I could stop because it has nothing to do with this point. If they didn't have the infinite money glitch, it looks like the most mismanaged manic team in the history of CS. Well, it still probably is the most mismanaged manic team in the history of CS. So totally redundant statement there, you fucking imbecile. They just happened to they just tripped over and somehow Monacy and Nico appeared and they started winning, even though those are some of the best players in the world. You know what I call it when an org signs some of the absolute best players in the world? One, an all-time legend with crazy longevity, and one, probably the most eligible player aside from Donk in the world right now to have as many years as possible at the top. That's great GMing. You might think the GMing before was shit. I would agree in some senses. This is fabulous GMing. But no. Now we're even going to punish Falcons and make them idiots for signing Monacy and Nico. As though what they did is they signed 50 players at random, like booster packs of Pokemon. And then they got lucky at the end of the 50 that Monacy and Nico came out. No. What they did is they tried to get Nico 2 years ago. Couldn't get him a year and a half ago. Then they eventually got him. And then they got Monacy as well. The latter part's great GMing. You might not like the first part. That's great. But no, let's add that in as bad GMing too. That they just try and random shit. It finally worked, didn't it? So they managed to finally get pieces that are undeniable in Nico Monacy. And guess what? They are booting another player so they can get another supposed powerhouse, right? Notice how he's gone from like undeniable players, but then he's put another supposed powerhouse, right? That doesn't even make sense in English, my dude. That implies that Nico and Monacy were supposed powerhouse players. Now, what you mean is they're getting another either powerhouse player, but you don't want to say that about Kioski. So you're saying he's a supposed five. Well, that doesn't make contextual sense. By the fact you can't even write what you want to say and express your own thoughts, I'm better at it than you. I'm going to go ahead and immediately say, I don't think you know what the fuck you're talking about when it comes to Youngstar, and I've nailed it. But let's keep going. And that's Youngstar's point. All of this, so about like how they fucking built up the squad, getting the right players, getting improving players, the Mongols, how they built the squad up, the history of Falcons, the infinite money glitch, getting all the mismanagement. That's Youngster's point. When he said this thing here about we're always hungry, want to prove the hard work beats money, so we're very much, that's what he was actually saying. I'm mentally ill for reading into it like he was just saying what he was saying. This is the sane person's take as approved by reddit.com, Global Offensive. This is the world we live in. So, okay, let's just keep going though. Falcons just throws money at all of its problems instead of trying to work them out. Pause. How does that make any sense in the context of Nico Monacy? You yourself acknowledge that they're the right players and are undeniable players, but by your logic, that's actually the wrong solution. What happens is when Falcons had issues before they had Nico Monacy, by your logic, they should have tried to work them out instead of signing Monacy and Nico. By your own logic. Because you're now saying that to throw money at the problem isn't the right answer, which is working on them. And that's how they've been operating since day one. Okay, Interesting. So, by the way, I think this is just a very good summary of what most of the people who would do the Contrarian backlash had to say. So let's just look at the actual facts of the matter, shall we? So let's ask ourselves a question, which is, how was this five-man Falcons roster formed? So let's go and look. Right, this year, 2025, on the 3rd of January, Falcons acquire Nico from G2 Esports, and then let Snappy go to what ends up being an IP. So they acquire Nico on 3rd of January. We're going to keep a track on these dates. The next day, on the 4th of January, they acquire Tesses, Kixon, and Dexter from Heroic. Now, this is where it gets hilarious. When you find out that essentially Heroic did exactly what Falcons did, but a worse version, none of this makes sense because no hard work component gets injected at any point. It's actually an idiot's way of seeing the scene. I just think he just misspoke because he's a young guy and someone just asked him some weird question about economics. So a day after that, they then signed the core of Heroic, the one that had made top 8 at the last major and almost beat G2, if you remember. Then, if you go over here, 4 days after that, they sell Sun Pius to Heroic. That's weird. Heroic got a Falcons player, but Heroic's building up their players who are unproven, and their hard work is how they will beat them. Well, then why are you using a Falcons player? Not only that, acquired. Do you mean that you actually paid? You bought with money a Falcons player, but every Falcons player sucks. And it's like Mongols. Do you remember when Mongols went and bought a Falcons player to make the team? Oh, they didn't do that ever, Thorin. Oh, my bad. It's almost like that isn't really a good actual fucking reference at all for these two squads. But okay, let's keep going though, shall we? Let's keep going, guys. Because you know there's one player left. We obviously need to get rid of Dexter. So on the 14th of April, Falcons bench Dexter and acquire Monacy from G2 Esports. Right, so what we had there is Nico came in first, then came in the 3 players from Heroic, then you sold Sun Pius, and you benched Dexter, and you got Monacy a few months later. Now let's look how Heroic was formed this year. What? Did you hear me say it this year? We're already shit out of luck then, innit? It's nothing like Mongols, is it? You didn't 5 players. You didn't invest in young talent. You didn't use hard work to develop them. You didn't do anything within the org. You didn't do anything, did you? And by the way, it missed me with the idea that hard work means you're playing all the tier 2 tournaments online. That wouldn't be relevant to LAN play. It would help with some of the tactical things, but you're not playing the same level of opposition, and you can only acquire the experience necessary on LAN against the tier 1 teams by playing on LAN against the tier 1 teams. And guess who's played on LAN this year against the tier 1 teams more? Falcons. That means by that logic, by the relevant work that would actually help you win in Counter-Strike, Falcons has done more work than Heroic. So Falcons has more talent, more money, and they've worked harder. But no more, my bad, it's about the orgs, remember. So let's go look at the Heroic org. So the Heroic org, remember, this all started on January the 3rd. So on January the 4th, they sold those 3 players to Falcons. Okay, sold the 3 players. Then they also sold 2 days later Nerds to Liquid. Then Shush was sold to NIP on the 8th, and then on the 10th, 6 or 7 days after this began, Heroic acquires their whole roster. By the way, get ready for the punchline, they acquired their whole roster after Falcons had built theirs. But wait, Thorin, wait, no. Heroic is hard work, and they've developed their team, and they've gambled on unproven players and signed them and then worked with them. Whereas all Falcons do is just throw money at things. So how did Heroic get their squad? They took all the money that they got from Falcons and just threw it at someone else's team and got that team. Are you ready? Heroic did the exact same thing Falcons did on a slightly lower down scale. Get ready. So let's go to here. January the 10th, Heroic acquires Sun Pius from Falcons. Already pointed out, you're literally signing a Falcons player. And you're using money to do it. So how exactly, if you could explain this to me, is that you found an unproven player called Checks Notes Sun Pius, who was a HLTV top 20 player in 2023, and you signed him from Falcons, which according to you must be an unproven, unknown team no one's ever heard of, and he's now playing on Heroic. So already that doesn't work. Then let's look what else you did. Then you signed a core. You know how you sold as Heroic your core to Falcons because Falcons wanted a core for the VRS points. Well, you wanted VRS points. So you didn't, like NIP, build up a squad. You went and you signed a core. You did a poor man's version of Falcons. You signed LNZ, Youngster, and Xfloud from Sangal. If you don't know, Sangal last year was at pro leagues and stuff. They were getting upset results. They were in the mix in the RMRs, etc. This isn't an unknown team. These aren't unproven players. The Xflow guy already looked good, by the way. LNZ used to literally play on NIP at fucking majors and shit, by the way. Like, this is nonsense. Then you signed this guy. Admittedly, this is a nice pickup. This guy from Gun 5, Tanir, this Belarusian player, not Belarusian, actually seems pretty fucking skilled. X-Cloud's also pretty good. LNZ's a decent IGL. So let me just consider this a second. You went to Gun 5, which is a known team in like the Tier 2, Tier 3 scene, and you signed their obvious talent. Then you signed an obvious player from Sangal. If you don't know, the other good Sangal player was Jota, but he went to Eternal Fire Aurora. You signed, essentially, the IGL and the Young Star. Get ready for the biggest joke. The Young Star isn't Young Star. And actually, a detail a lot of people won't know is... what's the other one? No, that's it. Yeah, so that's it. You signed all that. Oh, and by the way, what was one of the people that did all this for you? Oh, so that guy that you must have found, he must be like an unproven coach. And I went, oh, no, wait, you just bought Soft Mens when he'd already proven himself in 2023 and had his team in like finals, won a tier 1 event, in majors. Oh, not unproven at all. So even the person doing the development, which he wasn't developing anything, he's only had a few months. Yeah, he was there as well, was he? So in what possible context, by the way, could Heroic making their squad afterwards and doing a poor man's version using Falcons money to make their squad, which is just Sangal plus Sun Pius from Falcons and a really good up-and-coming player, in what way is that hard work as an org beating the money of the Falcons? And more importantly, how the fuck would the way these two teams built their rosters affect how Youngster sees going up in a match in Counter-Strike against Falcons, the players with an equal modesty? But no, guys, remember, I'm the one who's disingenuous and don't understand what's going on, and I'm just making up some crazy angle to be wrong about. And then Falcons, because they beat them, said, showing you what hard work looks like. So Heroic's like, hard work, all you did is use your credit card, says Heroic, who bought a player from Falcons and an entire core from a slightly smaller team called Sangal. So basically, you also just used your credit card, you just don't have as much of a limit. And again, what the fuck would any of that have to... Like, did they win because of money? Or did they win because they used their money to buy better players and the better players won the game? Exactly. I rest my motherfucking case. Oh yeah? You and whose army? Well, how about the Skrilluminati for one? They're the people who support my content. This video was kindly supported by The Concept, Matt, Pugnatio, Rajcula, Thooorin, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Jasun, Banediesel, Animosity, and you know it, everyone does. A special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion, for the long-term support. Do you want to ask a question for my AMA videos? Would you like teasers? Find out what upcoming guests I've got? You want to suggest a topic or a guest? Maybe you want to be part of one of those 1 hour lengthy online discussions I do where the topics are set by you. Well, if any of these perks or more tickle your fancy, I think you know what to do by now. Put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati, where Patreon link in the description below.